The GameCube has a lot of awesome first-person shooters, and last time in this series we covered the first 11 of the 22 first-person shooters in the GameCube library. In today's video we're going to cover the last 11 of the 22 first-person shooters on the GameCube, and there's some really good first-person shooters we're going to cover in today's video, and a couple that are pretty much shit dumpster fires. So let's go ahead and get into it and look at 11 more first-person shooters on the Nintendo GameCube. Peter Jackson's King Kong was published and developed by Ubisoft and was released on the GameCube, PS2, Xbox, and PC in November 2005. There was also a Game Boy Advance version and a DS version that came a bit later, and even later we got an Xbox 360 and PSP port. This is a licensed game that is actually really good, probably because the director of the game was the legendary game designer Michael Ansel, who designed the best Rayman games as well as Beyond Good and Evil. The game, of course, follows the plot of the movie, and the voice acting is done by most of the actual cast from the movie, which is a plus. The gameplay alternates between levels where you play as Jack Driscoll and levels where you play as Kong. In the human levels, you will journey through the island battling creatures from the island with weapons and limited ammo, and then whatever makeshift weapons you can find and utilize. There's optionally no HUD, allowing you to be more immersed into the game without a life bar, aiming reticule, or ammo display. In the King Kong levels, you will be traversing the island while defending Anne and battling creatures and partaking in massive boss battles. As Kong, you can punch, grab, throw, bite, charge, climb, and pound your chest to activate Fury mode. King Kong is single player only, and there are 39 chapters, with the game taking around 6 to 8 hours to complete. Now, I enjoyed what little I played for this video, as I found the game to be pretty damn immersive and also quite difficult as well. It is a pretty stressful game because ammo is very limited, and when you run out of ammo you have to scramble to find a natural weapon to use, which adds tension to the game because the natural weapons are just not that good. At the time of this recording, King Kong on the GameCube has a Metacritic critic score of 81 out of 100 and a user score of 8.5 out of 10. Peter Jackson's King Kong is a very unique and immersive first-person shooter with the added bonus of being an action-adventure game with some cool third-person King Kong gameplay. And I highly recommend playing this gem of a game that I hardly ever hear anybody talking about, which honestly is a shame. Play it. Red Faction 2 was published by THQ, and the GameCube version was developed by Cranky Pants Games. It was released for the PS2 first in October 2002, then the GameCube and Xbox in April 2003, and it released on the PC as well. Red Faction 2 is a badass, high quality, and explosive first-person shooter game with really smooth controls and fast-paced gameplay. One of the cool things about the game is that most of the environments are destructible, which plays heavily into the gameplay. There will be so many explosions and so much destruction that you'll feel like you're in a Michael Bay wet dream. You will wield a variety of guns, many of which have secondary fire, as well as some dual wielding with your weapons. The action in Red Faction 2 is non-stop and intense. There are 11 missions in Red Faction 2, but sadly the game is pretty short as it only takes about 4 to 6 hours to complete. But beyond the campaign, you do have split-screen multiplayer for up to 4 players with a variety of cool modes to choose from, making this a fantastic multiplayer split-screen shooter. Currently on Metacritic.com, the GameCube version of Red Faction 2 has a critic score of 79 out of 100 and a user score of 7.8 out of 10, making it a pretty highly rated first-person shooter game. I had an absolute blast playing Red Faction 2 with its fast-paced, intense, and explosive gameplay. And although the game is fairly short, I highly recommend playing it as it is a really high-quality first-person shooter. Serious Sam Next Encounter was published by Global Star Software, and it was developed by Climax Solent, and it released on the GameCube and PS2 on April 2004. Serious Sam Next Encounter sort of reminds me of Doom in a way. You will be moving through levels at a fast pace, shooting a ton of enemies coming at you from all directions, and you cannot stay still. You have to constantly be moving. It is a fairly difficult and intense first-person shooter that requires you to stay calm and have fast reflexes, and it's an absolute blast. You will use a variety of awesome guns, some that you find throughout the adventure, Some of the guns even have multiple ammo types you can switch between, and the controls are buttery smooth, which is a must for a game like this. There are 32 epic levels across 6 different timelines, and you will fight a ton of different enemies and bosses. The Sirius Sam Next Encounter campaign is pretty beefy as well, at around 8 to 11 hours, and you can play through each level co-op on split screen, which is awesome. There are also a variety of multiplayer modes for up to 4 players split screen, with a lot of quirky characters to choose from, power-ups, and customizable weapon sets. Currently on Metacritic.com, the GameCube version of Sirius Sam Next Encounter has a critic score of 69 out of 100 and a user score of 8.4 out of 10, making it yet again a pretty highly rated first-person shooter game, especially among users. I absolutely love Sirius Sam Next Encounter, as it is an intense, over-the-top blast of a game, and if you're looking for a really fun first-person shooter game to play on the Nintendo GameCube, then I highly recommend picking this one up. Star Wars Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast was published by LucasArts and developed by Vicarious Visions, and it was initially released on the GameCube, Xbox, and PC in March 2002. In my opinion, Jedi Outcast is one of the greatest Star Wars games ever made. In the game, you take on the role of Kyle Katarn, and you play through a massive single-player campaign spread across 24 chapters and taking 12 to 18 hours to complete. Levels are typically large and sprawling with multiple paths, and they are packed with enemies and secrets to find. You start out only being able to use guns in single-player gameplay, and there's a nice variety of firearms, explosives, and items you have access to. As you progress, you will eventually gain a lightsaber, and lightsaber combat switches over to third-person view. There are 3 different lightsaber combat styles and a variety of moves, and you also gain a variety of force powers such as force push, force pull, force choke, and force lightning. This is such a brilliantly designed Star Wars game and really gives you that Star Wars feel when you play it, and the controls are pretty smooth, but be warned, this is a challenging game unless you play it on easy mode, and even then it can be challenging. There's also Jedi Arena mode, which is a multiplayer mode for 2 players, and it can also be filled with bots, and there are a variety of modes within this mode and customization options within this mode as well to choose from. Currently on Metacritic.com, the GameCube version of Star Wars Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast has a critic score of 75 out of 100 and a user score of 8.1 out of 10. Star Wars Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast is not only a fantastic Star Wars game, but it's also a fantastic first-person shooter game, and I cannot recommend it enough. Whether you're a fan of Star Wars or first-person shooters or both, I highly recommend picking it up if you can find a copy, because the game is pretty rare. The Sum of All Fears was published by Ubisoft and developed by Red Storm Entertainment, and it released on the GameCube in December 2002, and it also came to the PS2, Xbox, and PC, and hell, it even came out on the Game Boy Advance. So I used to think Die Hard Vendetta was the worst GameCube first-person shooter. That was until I played The Sum of All Fears. This game is legitimate garbage. The Sum of All Fears tries to implement stripped-down gameplay from the Rainbow Six games, but fails miserably. You and 2 AI-controlled teammates try to complete a variety of objectives across 18 missions, and I couldn't even find data that shows how long the game takes to beat, because nobody probably played it long enough to actually beat it because of how bad the game is. Everything about this game is bad. The graphics, the sound design, the gameplay, but most of all, the controls. The controls are so damn stiff and unresponsive that the game is damn near unplayable. Your character moves so slow, and it is really hard to even move around effectively because he moves like he's having a seizure. But here's the strange thing. Despite all this, I oddly found myself enjoying the game in some strange and stupid way, probably because the game is so damn bad that it's comically good from a comedic standpoint, if that makes any sense at all. Currently on Metacritic.com, the GameCube version of The Sum of All Fears has a critic score of 36 out of 100 and a user score of 3.6 out of 10, which makes it the lowest rated first-person shooter game on the GameCube by a lot, even over Die Hard Vendetta. It's official, The Sum of All Fears is officially the worst first-person shooter game on the Nintendo GameCube, and I cannot recommend playing it unless you're going for a complete collection or if you just like playing shitty games. Now I'm going to be lumping Time Splitters 2 and Time Splitters Future Perfect into the same section because they're both similar games from the same series. Time Splitters 2 was published by Eidos or Eidos Interactive, however the hell you say it, and developed by Free Radical Design and released on the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox on October 2002. Time Splitters Future Perfect was published by EA Games and still developed by Free Radical Design, and it released on the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox in March 2005. Both Time Splitters games on the GameCube are really goofy and over-the-top arcade-style first-person shooter games that are just an absolute blast to play. The gameplay in the Time Splitters games consists of you and even a friend in co-op going through each mission, completing a variety of objectives and using a variety of weapons to make it to the end of each stage. You will be fighting aliens, zombies, monsters, soldiers, gangsters, the list goes on and on. Time Splitters 2 features 10 missions in the campaign and takes around 10 hours to complete. Time Splitters Future Perfect features 13 missions in the campaign and takes around 8 hours to complete. Both games also feature a challenge mode where you take on a variety of challenges with time limits to get medals, and they both have an arcade mode where you play a variety of multiplayer modes against bots to get medals. Then of course you can play split screen multiplayer in both games with up to 4 players in a variety of modes, and both games feature a map maker mode. So what's the main difference between the two games? Well, in my opinion, Time Splitters Future Perfect takes everything great about both games and takes it to another level. The missions are more robust and epic, the controls are better, so on and so on. One thing I love about the Time Splitters games is when you play missions on higher difficulties, not only are they harder, but they're longer and have more objectives as well. Currently on Metacritic.com, the GameCube version of Time Splitters 2 has a critic score of 88 out of 100 and a user score of 8.5 out of 10. And the GameCube version of Time Splitters Future Perfect has a critic score of 82 out of 100 and a user score of 8.5 out of 10. Both games are so much fun and absolutely packed full of content, whether it's single player, co-op, or multiplayer mayhem, and I highly recommend playing them, especially if you like over-the-top arcade first-person shooters. You're going to enjoy both games, but if you had to get one, I would say go with Time Splitters Future Perfect, as it is the better game in my opinion. Just like with the Time Splitters games, I'm going to lump Rainbow Six 3 and Rainbow Six Lockdown together into the same section since they're both similar games from the same series. Rainbow Six 3 was published and developed by Ubisoft and released on the GameCube in June 2004, and the PS2 in March 2004, and the Xbox in October 2003. Rainbow Six Lockdown was published by Ubisoft and developed by Red Storm Entertainment and released on the GameCube, PS2, Xbox, and PC in June 2005. Both Rainbow Six games are tactical squad-based first-person shooters. You will go through levels completing a variety of objectives while commanding your squad in various ways and trying to keep them all alive. You have to play these games very smart and tactically and plan each move carefully. You cannot just run and gun. You will die fast, as just a few shots will kill you. Because of this, these games can be quite difficult unless you take your time and play carefully. Rainbow Six 3 contains 15 single player missions, and the game takes around 7 hours to complete, and as you beat levels you can then replay them split screen co-op in 2 different modes. Rainbow Six Lockdown contains 14 single player missions, and the game takes around 7 to 8 hours to complete, and you can play missions split screens co-op as well as a terrorist hunt mode in co-op. Neither game for the GameCube has any kind of competitive multiplayer mode, which is a shame. Just like with the Time Splitters games, Rainbow Six Lockdown improves on Rainbow Six 3 in every way. In Rainbow Six 3, the biggest problem I saw, besides the controls being a bit stiff, was that the squad AI was a bit buggy and janky. In Rainbow Six Lockdown, not only are the controls smoothed way out, but the squad AI is much better. Currently on Metacritic.com, the GameCube version of Rainbow Six 3 has a critic score of 68 out of 100 and a user score of 6.8 out of 10, making it a pretty averagely reviewed game. And the GameCube version of Rainbow Six Lockdown has a critic score of 72 out of 100 and a user score of 7.8 out of 10. I think both games are quality first-person shooters, especially if you like tactical, squad-based, more realistic first-person shooter action. However, if you had to only pick one, I would say go with Rainbow Six Lockdown, as it's definitely the better game out of the two, but at the end of the day, you can't really go wrong with either one. Turok Evolution was published and developed by Acclaim, and it was released on the GameCube, PS2, Xbox, and Game Boy Advance September 2002. Turok Evolution is a prequel to Turok the Dinosaur Hunter, and features very similar first-person shooter gameplay, enemy settings, and guns to the OG Turok games, except of course with smoother first-person shooter controls. That notorious Turok difficulty is still there too, but it's not quite as difficult as the Nintendo 64 games. What is cool is that there are levels where you fly around on a winged dinosaur and shoot other enemies, and it sort of has a Panzer Dragoon feel and adds further gameplay variety. As you go through the 15 chapters, you will find awesome weapons along the way, some with different ammo types as well, and Turok Evolution takes around 8 hours to complete the single player campaign. But the fun doesn't stop there, as Turok Evolution features 4-player split-screen multiplayer with 14 different modes for plenty of fun and variety. Currently on Metacritic.com, the GameCube version of Turok Evolution has a critic score of 70 out of 100 and a user score of 7.0 out of 10. I was having an absolute blast playing Turok Evolution, and it brought back a lot of nostalgic memories of playing Turok and Turok 2 on the Nintendo 64, and it's a great quality first-person shooter, and I highly recommend giving it a try. 13 was published and developed by Ubisoft, and it was released on the GameCube, PS2, Xbox, and PC in November 2003. And there's actually a complete remake in all consoles in 2021, which I'm really excited about. 13 is a fantastic first-person shooter game featuring a really cool cel-shaded art style and comic book style cutscenes with a cool story revolving around a massive conspiracy. Each level has you completing a variety of objectives while engaging in action-packed gun battles and sometimes some cool stealth sections as well. The game uses the comic book style to emphasize kills as well as show you environmental and audio cues, and it is highly stylized. The single-player campaign is pretty beefy, featuring 13 chapters consisting of 34 missions of varying length, and the game takes around 9 to 12 hours to complete. There's also a multiplayer mode for up to 4 players with bots added optionally, and there are 4 different game modes to choose from. I'm not going to go into much more detail on 13 because I made an episode of GameCube Gallery on it, which I will leave a link to in the description down below, and I encourage you to watch it to learn even more about the game. Currently on Metacritic.com, the GameCube version of 13 has a critic score of 73 out of 100 and a user score of 7.3 out of 10. 13 is a very fun and unique first-person shooter game that I highly recommend everyone check out, and I cannot wait for the remake to come out in 2021 because honestly this game brought up to modern first-person shooter standards could result in a really fun, high-quality game. And really we need more first-person shooters like this on modern consoles, at least I feel like. Well, there you have it, folks. We have covered the rest of the first-person shooter games on the Nintendo GameCube, resulting in a total of 22 first-person shooter games covered between the two videos. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure and hit the like button. It really means a lot to me and helps out the channel quite a bit. Be sure and leave a comment down below what you think about some of the first-person shooter games I talked about in today's video. Which ones do you like the best? Which ones have you played? Which ones have you beat? Which ones do you have the best memories of? Throw all that in the comments down below. If you're new here, consider subscribing so that you can join the RetroWolf family. And as always, folks, stay safe out there, keep playing games and having a good time, and I will see you all in the next video. Later.